Chapter 1. The Princess in Exile. The lush forests of the alien planet Zilara stretched far and wide, bathed in the warm hues of its twin suns. In the midst of this serene landscape, a small figure stumbled through the dense underbrush, her once regal attire now tattered and stained with the dirt of her journey. Princess Alara of the Jorani Empire had known luxury and power her entire life, but now she was a fugitive, cast aside by those she had once trusted most. Alara's violet eyes, which had once held the confidence of a ruler in training, were now filled with fear and uncertainty. Her pale blue skin, a hallmark of her royal lineage, was marred by cuts and bruises, a testament to the dangers she had faced in her flight from the imperial palace. She could hardly believe how quickly everything had changed. Just days ago, she had been preparing to ascend to the throne, following in the footsteps of her mother, the Empress. But a coup had shattered those dreams, orchestrated by her own uncle, General Rylus, who sought to claim the throne for himself. Alara's mother had been captured, and Alara had barely escaped with her life, thanks to the bravery of a few loyal guards. But now, she was alone. The dense forest of Zilara offered some protection, but it was also home to countless dangers: wild beasts, treacherous terrain, and the ever-present risk of discovery by her uncle's soldiers. As night began to fall, Alara felt the weight of her situation pressing down on her. She was cold, hungry, and exhausted, with no clear plan for what to do next. As she stumbled through the underbrush, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Panic seized her heart. Had her uncle's soldiers found her already? She quickly hid behind a thick tree trunk, holding her breath as the footsteps grew closer. Her mind raced, trying to remember the combat training she had received as part of her royal education. But she knew that she was no match for a group of armed soldiers. To her surprise, the figure that emerged from the trees was not a soldier, but a young human. He looked to be around her age, with tousled brown hair and a worn backpack slung over his shoulder. He was dressed in simple clothes, clearly not a native of Zilara. The sight of a human in such a remote part of the galaxy was unexpected, to say the least. The young man seemed unaware of her presence as he crouched down to examine a plant growing near the base of a tree. Alara watched him carefully, debating whether to reveal herself. On one hand, humans were known to be resourceful and might be able to help her. On the other hand, she had no idea who this human was or what he was doing on Zilara. Trust was a luxury she could not afford. But as she watched him, she noticed something that made her reconsider. The human appeared to be talking to himself, muttering about the properties of the plant he was examining. He pulled out a small device from his backpack, which scanned the plant and displayed some information on a screen. Alara recognized the device as a type of scanner used by botanists and scientists. Could this human be a researcher? Her curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to take a risk. Stepping out from behind the tree, she called out to him, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" The young man jumped at the sound of her voice, spinning around to face her. His eyes widened in surprise as he took in her appearance, but he quickly recovered, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "Whoa, easy there. I'm not here to cause any trouble. My name's Ethan, and I'm just a student from Earth. I'm here on a research trip for my university. Who are you?" Alara hesitated for a moment before replying, "I am Princess Alara of the Jorani Empire. I need your help." Ethan blinked in astonishment, clearly not expecting to encounter royalty in the middle of an alien forest. But he quickly nodded, his expression turning serious. "Princess Alara, what happened? Why are you out here all alone?" Alara took a deep breath and began to explain her situation, telling Ethan about the coup, her uncle's betrayal, and her desperate flight from the palace. As she spoke, she could see the concern in Ethan's eyes, and when she finished, he looked determined. "I can't believe what you've been through," Ethan said, shaking his head. "But you don't have to go through this alone. I may just be a student, but I know a thing or two about survival. We'll figure out a way to get you to safety." Alara felt a surge of hope for the first time since her escape. Perhaps she wasn't as alone as she had thought. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." Ethan gave her a reassuring smile. "We'll get through this together, Princess. First, we need to find some shelter for the night. It's not safe out here after dark." Alara nodded in agreement, and the two of them began to search for a suitable place to rest. As they walked through the forest, Alara couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. She had lost everything, her throne, her family, her home, but in this human stranger, she had found an ally, and perhaps that was the first step toward reclaiming what had been taken from her. Chapter 2. The Unlikely Alliance. The next morning, Alara woke to the sound of birds chirping high in the trees above. She sat up, momentarily disoriented, before the memories of the previous day came flooding back. The coup, her escape, meeting Ethan, the human who had agreed to help her. She glanced to her side and saw Ethan still asleep, his head resting on his backpack. The two of them had managed to find a small cave to shelter in for the night, far enough from the main trails that they wouldn't be easily discovered. Alara was grateful for Ethan's knowledge of the terrain. Without him, she would have likely wandered aimlessly through the forest until she was caught. As she watched Ethan sleep, she marveled at the oddity of the situation. She had been taught that humans were a primitive species, technologically inferior to the Jirani and other advanced civilizations. Yet here was this human, offering her protection and guidance in a time of desperate need. It was humbling, in a way, and it made her realize how much she had taken for granted. Ethan stirred, opening his eyes and blinking up at her. "Morning," he mumbled, stretching his arms. "Did you sleep okay?" Alara nodded. "As well as can be expected, considering everything." "Good to hear." Ethan yawned and sat up, pulling a small ration bar from his backpack. He offered one to Alara, who accepted it gratefully. As they ate, Ethan began to outline their plan for the day. "We need to get as far away from the palace as possible," he said. "The forest is pretty dense, so it should give us some cover. But we can't stay here forever. My ship is parked a few kilometers to the west. If we can reach it, I can get us off this planet." Alara's eyes widened. "You have a ship?" Ethan grinned. "Yeah, it's not much. Just a small shuttle, really. But it'll get us to safety. From there, we can figure out our next move." For the first time since her escape, Alara felt a glimmer of hope. If they could reach Ethan's ship, they could get off Zilara and out of her uncle's reach. But the journey would be dangerous. The forest was vast and full of perils, and there was no telling if Relis's soldiers were already searching for her. As they set out, Alara couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She was used to being in control, to having the power to command others, but now she was relying on a human, a stranger, to guide her through this ordeal. It was a vulnerability she had never experienced before, and it made her uncomfortable. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds being the rustling of leaves and the occasional distant call of a creature. Alara found herself stealing glances at Ethan, wondering what kind of person he was. He seemed kind and determined, but she knew little about him beyond that. Why had he agreed to help her? What did he stand to gain? Finally, her curiosity got the better of her. "Ethan," she began, "why are you helping me? You barely know me, and this isn't your fight. You could easily leave and continue your research without getting involved in all of this." Ethan glanced at her, surprised by the question. "I guess I could," he admitted, "but I wouldn't feel right just leaving you to fend for yourself. You were in trouble, and I was in a position to help. I couldn't just walk away." Alara considered his words. "But it's dangerous. You could be risking your life by helping me." "I know," Ethan replied, his tone serious. "But I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try to help. My parents always taught me that if you can make a difference, you should. Besides," he added with a small smile, "it's not every day you get to help a princess." Alara couldn't help but smile at his words, despite the gravity of their situation. Ethan's willingness to help her, even at great personal risk, was something she hadn't expected. It was a quality she admired, and it made her feel a little less alone in this strange and dangerous world. As they continued their journey, Alara found herself opening up to Ethan more and more. She told him about her life in the palace, her training as a future ruler, and her relationship with her mother, the Empress. Ethan listened intently, asking questions and sharing stories of his own life on Earth. He told her about his studies, his love for exploring new worlds, and his fascination with alien cultures. Despite their differences, Alara found that she and Ethan had a lot in common. They both felt the weight of expectations. Alara as a future empress, and Ethan as a student striving to make a name for himself in the field of xenobiology. They both had a deep curiosity about the universe and a desire to understand the unknown. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, Alara felt a bond forming between them, a bond forged by shared experiences and mutual respect. It was a strange feeling, but not an unwelcome one. She had never had a true friend before, someone who saw her as more than just a princess. With Ethan, she felt like she could be herself. As they emerged from the trees, they found themselves standing on a rocky ridge overlooking a vast canyon. In the distance, Alara could see the glint of metal. A small shuttle parked near the edge of the canyon. Relief washed over her at the sight of their escape route. "That's it," Ethan said, pointing to the shuttle. "Once we reach the ship, we'll be home free." But as they began to make their way down the ridge, Alara's heart sank. She spotted movement near the shuttle, several figures in dark armor patrolling the area. Realis's soldiers had found the ship before them. Ethan cursed under his breath. "This isn't good. They're blocking our only way out." Alara's mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. They were outnumbered and outgunned, with no way to reach the shuttle without being seen. But she refused to give up. She had come too far to be captured now. "There's another way," she said, her voice steady. "But it's risky." Ethan looked at her, determination in his eyes. "I'm listening." Alara quickly explained her plan. There was a narrow path leading down into the canyon, one that was treacherous and difficult to navigate. It would take them close to the soldiers' position, but if they were careful, they might be able to slip past unnoticed. Once they were close enough, Alara could use her knowledge of Jirani technology to disable the shuttle's security systems and allow them to board undetected. Ethan listened carefully, nodding as she laid out the details. "It's risky, but it might just work," he agreed. "Let's do it." With their plan in place, the two of them began their descent into the canyon. The path was steep and uneven, and Alara had to concentrate to keep her footing. But despite the danger, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just running away anymore. She was fighting back, taking control of her destiny. As they neared the bottom of the canyon, the soldiers came into view. Alara and Ethan crouched low, moving slowly and silently to avoid detection. Alara's heart pounded in her chest as they crept closer to the shuttle. The soldiers were on high alert, their weapons at the ready, but they hadn't spotted them yet. When they were just a few meters away from the shuttle, Alara signaled for Ethan to stop. She pulled out a small device from her belt, one of the few pieces of technology she had managed to keep during her escape. It was a multi-tool, capable of interfacing with Jirani systems and overriding security protocols. With practiced precision, Alara began to hack into the shuttle's systems, her fingers moving quickly over the device's controls. The process took longer than she would have liked, but finally, she heard the soft beep of success. The shuttle's security systems were offline. "Let's go," she whispered to Ethan, and together they made a dash for the shuttle's entrance. The next few moments were a blur. They reached the shuttle just as one of the soldiers spotted them, shouting a warning to his comrades. But Alara and Ethan were already inside, the door closing behind them. Alara quickly activated the ship's engines, and with a roar, the shuttle lifted off the ground, leaving the soldiers behind in a cloud of dust. As they soared into the sky, Alara allowed herself a moment of triumph. They had done it. They had escaped. But she knew this was only the beginning. There was still much to be done, and many challenges ahead. But for the first time in days, she felt hope, a hope that burned bright and fierce, fueled by the determination of a human and an alien princess, united in a common cause. Chapter 3. The Hidden Threat. The shuttle sped through the atmosphere, breaking free of Zalara's gravity and entering the vastness of space. Alara slumped back in her seat, her chest heaving as the adrenaline of their escape began to wear off. Ethan was at the controls, his eyes focused on the navigation system as he plotted a course away from the planet. "We did it," Ethan said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "We actually made it." Alara nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thanks to you," she replied. "I couldn't have done this without your help, Ethan." He turned to her, his expression serious. "We're not out of the woods yet. Rylas's forces will be looking for us. We need to find a safe place to lay low and figure out our next move." Alara's smile faded as the reality of their situation set in. Her uncle's reach was vast, and there were few places in the galaxy where they could truly be safe. But she knew of one place, one that was well hidden and off the radar of most galactic powers. "There's a place we can go," she said. "An old outpost on the edge of Jorani space. It was abandoned years ago, but I believe it's still functional. We can hide there while we plan our next steps." Ethan nodded, trusting her judgment. He adjusted the ship's course and set the coordinates for the outpost. As the shuttle sped toward its destination, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had escaped her uncle's clutches, but the threat he posed was far from over. As the stars streaked by outside the cockpit, Alara turned her thoughts to her mother. The Empress was still in the hands of Rylas, and the thought of what he might do to her filled Alara with dread. She had to find a way to rescue her mother and reclaim the throne. But how? Rylas had the full might of the Jorani military at his disposal, and she had only a small shuttle and a human student by her side. Lost in her thoughts, Alara didn't notice Ethan watching her. "You okay?" he asked gently, pulling her out of her reverie. Alara sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm worried about my mother. She's still in the palace, and I can only imagine what Rylas might do to her. I have to find a way to save her, but I don't know how." Ethan leaned back in his seat, considering her words. "We'll figure something out," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We've come this far, and we're not giving up now. There has to be a way to get to her." Alara appreciated his optimism, but the odds seemed insurmountable. She had spent her entire life preparing to rule the Jorani Empire, but nothing had prepared her for this. She was in uncharted territory, and the stakes couldn't be higher. As they neared the coordinates of the outpost, Alara's thoughts were interrupted by the ship's sensors picking up a nearby signal. She leaned forward, frowning at the display. "What is that?" she asked. Ethan checked the readings, his expression growing serious. "It looks like a distress signal," he said. "It's coming from a nearby asteroid field." Alara hesitated. They were on a tight schedule, and any delay could put them at risk. But the thought of leaving someone in need of help didn't sit well with her, especially after everything she had been through. "Can we investigate?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "We can spare a few minutes. If someone's in trouble, we might be able to help." Alara agreed, and Ethan adjusted their course to head toward the signal. As they approached the asteroid field, the signal grew stronger, and soon they were close enough to see the source, a small, battered ship barely holding together. "Looks like they've been in a fight," Ethan observed. "Their ship's in bad shape." Alara's eyes narrowed as she studied the damaged vessel. Something didn't feel right. "Be careful, Ethan. This could be a trap." Ethan nodded, bringing the shuttle to a halt a safe distance from the ship. He opened a communication channel, sending out a standard greeting. "This is Ethan Ward of the Shuttle Horizon. We received your distress signal. Do you require assistance?" For a moment, there was only static in response. Then a garbled voice came through the speakers, barely intelligible. "Help, we're attacked. Need assistance." Alara exchanged a wary glance with Ethan. "We need to be cautious," she said, "but we can't just leave them here." Ethan nodded, and with careful precision, he maneuvered the shuttle closer to the damaged ship. As they neared the vessel, the extent of the damage became clear. Holes were punched through the hull, and scorch marks covered the exterior. Whatever had attacked this ship had been ruthless. They docked with the ship, and after ensuring their shuttle was secure, Alara and Ethan boarded the vessel. The interior was dark, with flickering lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. Alara felt a chill run down her spine as they made their way through the narrow corridors. "Stay close," Ethan whispered, his hand resting on the handle of a blaster he had taken from the shuttle. Alara nodded, her senses on high alert. The ship was eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak of metal. They reached the bridge, where the distress signal had originated, and found it empty. The consoles were damaged, and the air was thick with the smell of burnt circuitry. "Where is everyone?" Alara wondered aloud, her voice echoing in the empty space. Before Ethan could answer, a noise behind them made them both spin around. Alara's heart raced as they saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a tall, humanoid alien, badly injured and barely able to stand. The alien's eyes were filled with fear as it collapsed to the floor. Ethan rushed forward, kneeling beside the alien. "We're here to help," he said, his voice gentle. "What happened to you?" The alien struggled to speak, its voice weak and strained. "Ambush! Pirates! Took everything! Please! Help!" Alara's suspicions deepened. Pirates were a common threat in this part of space, but something about this situation felt off. Why would pirates leave a ship this badly damaged and send out a distress signal instead of finishing the job? Before she could voice her concerns, the alien let out a pained gasp and slumped over, unconscious. Ethan checked for a pulse, but it was clear the alien had succumbed to its injuries. "We need to get out of here," Alara said, her voice urgent. "This doesn't feel right." Ethan agreed, and they quickly made their way back to the shuttle. But as they prepared to disengage from the ship, the shuttle's sensors suddenly went haywire. "Something's wrong," Ethan said, frantically checking the controls. "I'm picking up multiple energy signatures. Ships coming out of hyperspace." Alara's heart pounded in her chest. They had walked right into a trap. "We need to get out of here, now." Ethan didn't need to be told twice. He activated the shuttle's engines, but before they could break free, the ship was rocked by a powerful blast. The screens flashed red as alarms blared throughout the cockpit. "We're hit!" Ethan shouted, struggling to keep the shuttle under control. "They've got us in a tractor beam. We're being pulled in." Alara's mind raced, trying to think of a way out. But with the shuttle's systems compromised and the enemy closing in, their options were limited. She had to act fast if they were going to survive. "Ethan, can you access the shuttle's self-destruct sequence?" she asked, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. Ethan glanced at her, his eyes wide. "What? You want to blow up the shuttle?" "It's our only chance," Alara replied. "If we detonate the shuttle while we're still docked, the explosion might be enough to break us free of the tractor beam, but we'll have to move quickly." Ethan hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Okay, I'll set it up, but we'll have to get to the escape pods immediately." As Ethan began the sequence, Alara prepared for the critical moment. The enemy ships were closing in, and they had mere seconds to execute their plan. The shuttle shuddered under the force of the tractor beam, and Alara's heart raced as she and Ethan made their way to the escape pods. "Ready?" Ethan asked, his finger hovering over the final command. "Do it," Alara said. Ethan pressed the button and the shuttle's self-destruct countdown began. Alarms blared, and Alara and Ethan jumped into the escape pods, launching them away from the shuttle just as the timer reached 0. The explosion was deafening, and the shockwave sent their pods spinning through space. Alara held on tightly as the pod stabilizers kicked in, steadying their trajectory. The enemy ships were caught off guard by the sudden blast, and Alara watched as the wreckage of the shuttle tumbled through space. "We did it!" Ethan's voice crackled through the comm system. "We're free!" But Alara knew their escape was only temporary. The enemy ships would regroup soon, and they were still far from safety. As their escape pods drifted through space, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real threat was still out there, waiting to strike. Chapter 4. A Fight for the Throne. The escape pods drifted in the cold, silent void of space, far from any known star systems. Alara's mind raced as she considered their next move. They had narrowly escaped the ambush, but their situation was dire. They were alone, without a ship, and the enemy was still out there, hunting them. She activated the comm system, reaching out to Ethan in the other pod. "Ethan, are you okay?" "I'm fine," came his reply, though his voice was strained. "But we can't stay out here for long. The pods have limited life support, and we're too far from any inhabited systems to call for help." Alara knew he was right. They had only bought themselves a little time, and they needed a plan if they were going to survive. She accessed the pod's navigational systems, searching for any nearby planets or space stations where they could seek refuge. "There's a small planetoid not too far from here," she said, relief flooding her as she found a possible refuge. "It's uninhabited, but it has an old mining outpost. We could take shelter there and try to repair the comm systems." "Let's do it," Ethan agreed. With the coordinates locked in, the escape pods fired their thrusters and set a course for the planetoid. As they traveled through space, Elara couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. She had been forced to flee her home, leaving her mother in the hands of a traitor, and now she was on the run, hunted by enemies she didn't fully understand. But she wasn't alone. Ethan had risked his life to help her, and together they had overcome impossible odds. Elara felt a deep sense of gratitude toward him, as well as a growing determination to reclaim what was rightfully hers. As they approached the planetoid, the escape pod's sensors picked up the faint energy signature of the mining outpost. It was an old facility, long abandoned by its original occupants, but it still had power and basic life support. It would be a safe place to regroup and plan their next move. The pods touched down on the rocky surface of the planetoid, and Elara and Ethan emerged into the thin, frigid air. The outpost loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the barren landscape. They made their way inside, the heavy doors creaking as they pushed them open. The interior of the outpost was cold and dark, but the air was breathable, and there was enough power to activate the emergency lighting. Elara and Ethan quickly set to work, repairing the outpost's systems and checking the comm array for any signs of incoming ships. "We're safe for now," Ethan said, his voice echoing in the empty chamber. "But we need to figure out who's after us and why." Elara nodded, her mind working through the possibilities. Realus was the most obvious suspect. He had already betrayed her once, and it made sense that he would want to eliminate any threats to his claim on the throne. But the ambush felt too well coordinated, too precise for a simple military operation. There was something more at play, something she couldn't quite grasp. As they worked, Elara noticed a flicker on the outpost's long-range sensors. She leaned in, her heart skipping a beat as she realized what she was seeing. A ship was approaching fast. "Ethan, we've got company," she said, her voice tense. Ethan joined her at the console, his eyes narrowing as he studied the readings. "That's no ordinary ship," he said. "It's a Jurani warship, one of the elite guard." Elara's blood ran cold. The elite guard were the most loyal and deadly soldiers in the Jurani Empire, trained to protect the royal family at all costs. But if they were here, it could only mean one thing. They had been sent by Rylus to finish the job. "We have to prepare for a fight," Elara said, her voice steely. "They won't stop until we're dead." Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "We'll make our stand here. We've got the element of surprise, and this outpost has some defensive capabilities. It's not much, but it's better than nothing." As they hurried to ready the outpost's defenses, Elara's thoughts turned to her mother. If she fell here, Rylus would cement his control over the Empire, and her mother would be lost. She couldn't let that happen. She had to survive, to fight back, and to reclaim her birthright. The warship drew closer, and the tension in the air was palpable. Elara and Ethan took their positions, ready to defend the outpost with everything they had. The outpost's ancient turrets hummed to life, their targeting systems locking onto the incoming ship. When the warship finally entered range, all hell broke loose. The turrets opened fire, sending streams of energy bolts toward the sleek, menacing vessel. The warship's shields flared, absorbing the initial barrage, but the sheer volume of fire was enough to cause it to swerve and dodge. "Keep it up!" Ethan shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the battle. "We're wearing them down." But the warship was relentless. It returned fire, its cannons unleashing a torrent of destructive energy that pounded the outpost's shields. The ground shook with the impact, and Elara could feel the strain on the outpost's ancient systems. "We can't hold out much longer," she said, gritting her teeth as she tried to maintain the targeting lock on the warship. But just as it seemed the outpost's defenses would buckle under the assault, the warship hesitated. Elara saw the reason a moment later. A new ship had entered the fray, coming up fast on the warship's flank. It was a Jurani cruiser, its markings identifying it as one of the Royal Fleet's vessels. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, confusion written on his face. Alara's heart soared with hope. "That's one of my mother's ships. The Royal Fleet has come to help us." The cruiser opened fire on the warship, its powerful cannons tearing through the enemy's shields and armor. The warship tried to evade, but the cruiser's fire was relentless, and within moments, the warship was crippled, its engines flickering and failing. With the enemy warship disabled, the cruiser turned its attention to the outpost. Alara and Ethan watched in silence as the cruiser descended, landing near the entrance. The tension in the air was thick as they waited to see who would emerge. The hatch of the cruiser opened, and Alara's breath caught in her throat as a familiar figure stepped out. It was her mother, the Empress, flanked by a squad of elite royal guards. "Mother!" Alara cried, rushing forward to greet her. The Empress's eyes softened as she embraced her daughter. "Alara, my brave girl, I feared the worst when I heard of the attack." "I'm so glad you're safe," Alara said, tears of relief in her eyes. "But how did you find us?" The Empress smiled, glancing at Ethan. "I had help. Your friend here managed to send out a distress signal just before the ambush. It reached one of our patrols and they alerted me. We came as quickly as we could." Ethan looked surprised but pleased. "I didn't even realize the signal got through. I guess we got lucky." The Empress turned to Ethan, her expression warm. "Luck may have played a part, but it's clear that you've been a true friend to my daughter. For that, you have my deepest thanks." Ethan blushed, clearly not used to such praise. "I was just doing what I could to help." Alara beamed at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You've done more than that, Ethan. You've helped me survive, and together, we've fought back against those who would see my family destroyed." The Empress nodded, her expression turning serious. "Rylas's treachery will not go unpunished. He has overstepped his bounds, and now it's time to take back what he has stolen." Alara's resolve hardened. "I'm ready, Mother. We'll fight together, and we'll restore the Empire." With the Empress's forces now at their side, Alara and Ethan returned to the royal palace, where the final battle awaited. Rylas had fortified his position, but his forces were no match for the combined might of the Empress's loyal soldiers and the fury of an alien princess, determined to reclaim her throne. The battle was fierce, but in the end, Alara's determination and the support of her allies proved too much for Rylas's forces. The traitor was captured, and the rightful order was restored. Alara stood victorious, her mother at her side, as the people of the Jirani Empire hailed her as their future leader. As the celebrations began, Alara sought out Ethan, who had been instrumental in her journey. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you." Ethan smiled, his eyes twinkling with pride. "It was an honor, Princess. I'm just glad I could help." Alara nodded, a sense of peace settling over her. She had faced incredible challenges, but with courage, determination, and the support of a true friend, she had emerged stronger than ever. The future of the Jirani Empire was bright, and Alara knew that, with allies like Ethan by her side, she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. And so, the tale of the alien princess and the human student came to a close, not as a story of loss, but as one of hope, friendship, and the unbreakable bonds that can be forged in the face of adversity.